Hello, I'm Dr. Ken Landa. Thanks for watching. Let's talk about Ajovy. Ajovy is a drug for prevention of migraine headaches that was approved by the Food and Drug Administration in September 2018. The second drug in its class for prevention, not treatment, for prevention of migraine headaches in people who have at least 4 migraine headache days per month. Now, in spite of the fact that migraines are very common, relatively few people take preventive therapy, estimated only between 5 and 15% of all the migraine people, migraine sufferers, are going to take some preventive therapy. Migraine is very important. It ranks in the top 10 as far as the global disease burden of medical issues is concerned. In neurologic diseases, ranks second just after stroke for disability. 38 million people in the United States suffer from stroke. That's 18% of the population, caused by genetic factors and environmental modifiers. It's a complex neurologic disease associated with recurrent attacks of pulsating headaches that are of at least moderate to severe intensity. If we look at people with migraine, just in the past 3 months, a significant percentage of them, about a quarter of them, are going to have missed 1 day of work or school. About 30% of the people with migraine are going to have at least 1 attack per week. Slightly less than 10% going to have 10 to 14 attacks per month. Ajovy might be an answer for some. Comes in a pre-filled syringe, has 225 milligrams active ingredient in it. You have 2 options for the therapy. Either 1 injection a month or 3 injections at one time every 3 months. It's injected pretty much like insulin. It's injected into the thigh, the abdomen, the upper arm. You don't inject it into red or irritated or inflamed skin, of course. Pinch the skin, inject at a 45 to a 90-degree angle, and you follow a simple protocol. You store the medicine in the refrigerator, take it out about half an hour before you use it. You don't speed the process up with either hot water or microwave. You don't freeze it, don't shake it. Protect the medicine from sunlight. You dispose of the used syringe appropriately. Don't put it in the household trash. Probably not appropriate for pregnant women, although there is no evidence that it's harmful, but there's no evidence that it's not. Same thing for nursing mothers. Don't really have any information about pediatric population, so not approved for children. So let's look at people who have episodic migraines. At least 4 to 14 migraine headache days per month. And remember, we're using it for preventive therapy, not for acute therapy. The studies involved mostly women, mostly Caucasian women. Average age was about 40. They were allowed to take 1 additional preventive medication. About 20% of the people did. They were excluded if they had any active cardiovascular disease. And even in the study, under the closest supervision, several of the women became pregnant. Well, what was the outcome? First of all, the outcome doesn't make any difference whether you get the injections once a month or 3 injections at one time every 3 months. So on average, the people who entered the study had about 9 migraine headache days per month. With the therapy, they were able to decrease the number of migraine headache days, by a little more than 3.5. That was if they received the monthly injection, a little less than 3.5 days if they received the injections every 3 months. Remember, they started with 9 and were able to reduce the number of headache days by 3.7. So in other words, they still had 5 to 5.5 migraine headache days on average per month. How's that compare to placebo? Placebo reduced the number of headache days by about 2.2. So a little more than 2 days fewer with migraine headache with a placebo compared to about 3.5 days if they took the active drug. That means the difference between the two was only about 1.5 days. So that's relatively small benefit compared to the placebo, even less than the organizers of the study anticipated. So if we look at the likelihood of reducing the number of migraine headache days by either 4, 5, or 6, with the active therapy, the likelihood that the patients were able to reduce the number of headache days by 4, 5, or 6 was a little bit less than 25%. And compared to placebo, that was able to reduce it by about 17%. So that doesn't sound all that great. Now, as a matter of fact, the International Headache Society, their clinical trials subcommittee, they say that success for prevention of migraine headaches means that you can reduce the number of headaches by at least 50%, at least 50%. By that standard, Ajovy doesn't work. And that's under the best of circumstances. The study had 10 authors, 7 of whom either worked for or were receiving money from Teva Pharmaceuticals. The study was done in 123 different sites in 9 different countries. Teva used their money to fund the study. They performed the data analysis. They had a medical writer who helped with the manuscript preparation. Actually, the authors of the study had 33 pages of financial disclosure. Now remember, 36 million people in the United States with migraine. They had to go to 123 different centers in 9 different countries. These involved academic medical centers and private practices and for-profit research clinics. They involved specialty headache centers and primary care clinics. And they still had to resort to advertising to bring in about 300 of the patients. The New England Journal of Medicine, looking at the data, said, hey, it's only modestly effective. And remember, that's against a placebo. And no study has really evaluated, if you're receiving the medicine, how well does the medicine for acute headache work? Does it not work maybe as well? Well, let's look at the chronic migraine headaches. Chronic migraine headaches have at least 15 headache days per month. So in the studies, there were, on average, patients had about 20 days of some sort of headache, any severity, but 13 days of moderate to severe intensity headache. So we'll call those the migraines. And the treatment, again, either monthly or quarterly. And they were able to reduce the number of headache days per month by about 4.5 days. Now remember, the people who started off with 13 days, they reduced it by about 4.5 days. That's about a 1/3 reduction. And remember, the International Headache Society says we've got to be above 50%. The placebo was able to reduce the number of migraine headache days per month by about 2.5. So again, we're not very impressive. We reduce it by about 4 days or so with the active therapy, by about 2 days or so with the placebo therapy. And if we look again at, let's say, the likelihood of reducing the number of migraine headache days by, let's say, 4 to 6. Okay, 4, 5, or 6 days fewer with the therapy. Less than 20% with the active drug and 15% about with the placebo. So the Journal of the American Medical Association says, hey, you know, these drugs, they're pretty darn expensive, and they don't seem to work any better than the medicines already on the market, the prophylactic drugs, the preventive drugs that are already there. They reduce the likelihood of migraine headaches by 1.5 or 2 days. So what do we need these new expensive drugs for? Well, the new drugs, the Ajovy, is a gamma globulin. It's an IgG. It's humanized, but it's grown in a Chinese hamster ovary with recombinant DNA technology. It's fully humanized. And we assume that it works on the calcitonin gene-related peptide, but we don't know that. It doesn't have a lot of side effects. Sometimes the local site of injection could either become red or inflamed or swollen or red. Sometimes people can develop some hypersensitivity reaction, rash, hives, itchiness, but that's typically very mild if it occurs at all. And sometimes people develop elevation of their liver enzymes, but that doesn't seem to be very common or very dangerous. And sometimes people can actually develop antibodies to the medicine itself. In the New England Journal of Medicine, they've had case reports where people on therapy have developed hypertensive crisis, died with COPD, chronic obstructive lung disease, developed suicidal ideations in a person who already had a history of depression. And one person who withdrew the consent for therapy 109 days after receiving the injection, the triple injection, died from suicide. Don't know that there's any cause and effect, but those have been reported. If we look at the pharmacology of the drug, maximum concentration in the blood in about 5 to 7 days, steady state within about 6 months. Half-life is about a month. It's metabolized like any other kind of antibody inside the body. It's not dependent on the liver, not dependent on the kidney, so it's okay if you have liver disease, kidney disease. No known drug interactions. If you're going to respond to the therapy, you're going to respond usually within the first month, so you don't have to continue taking the drug for month after month after month. If you keep getting your headaches, hey, if it doesn't work pretty quickly, it's not going to work at all. We don't know that blocking that CGRP is really a good thing to do. After all, if it prevents vasodilation, what happens if you have high blood pressure? Could you develop a hypertensive crisis like the person reported in the New England Journal? Or what happens if you have myocardial ischemia? You have spasm of the blood vessels in your heart? You have angina? Is this going to make it worse? Well, at least we know you shouldn't take the drug with cocaine or with marijuana or with an SSRI. That's a drug like Prozac or Zoloft. If we look at the family of these drugs, the first to market was Ajovy. That got its approval in May of 2018. There was pent-up demand, so it's the bestseller. Then we have Emgality, and we have Ajovy. Ajovy was thought by its manufacturers to maybe also have a market in the prevention of chronic cluster headaches, but they discontinued the phase 3 trials in 2018 because it didn't meet the guidelines. Actually, the study was pretty underwhelming for just 12 weeks, but the company is going to persevere on. They're going to try to repeat the study, see if the second time it'll work. The preventive therapies on the market, the current drug therapies, pill therapies, they're underused. They're not uniformly effective. They all have some side effects. Problem with adherence to the drugs like valproate, amitriptyline, or Effexor, or Cymbalta. People use the beta blockers frequently, drugs like atenolol, metoprolol, propranolol, topramate. Sometimes injections of Botox even are helpful. Calcitonin gene-related peptide, very small neuropeptide, bunch of amino acids, about 37 different amino acids. They are important in vasodilation. It seems that they're present in the dorsal root ganglia of the trigeminal nerve. So theoretically, CGRP has a major role to play in migraine headaches. But it seems like people who are getting therapy to block the chemical, well, they still have migraine headaches, so it's not the complete answer to the story. These drugs only became available in 2018. Actually, if we're talking about Ajovy, it wasn't even developed by Teva Pharmaceuticals. It's only licensed to Teva. It was originally developed by Renat Neurosciences Corporation. It was a privately held corporation. Now it's owned by Pfizer. Teva is the world's largest generic drug manufacturer, but they've made some missteps lately and had some problems. They actually had an operating loss of $17 billion in 2017, and one of their lead drugs, Copaxone, is going off patent. Now it's going to be available generically. And then, unfortunately, they bought the generic drug manufacturing business of Allergan Pharmaceutical just as the prices for that market tanked. So they estimate fair amount of sales, but the question is, what's an appropriate price for this drug that really only works modestly well? The drug company says $575 a month. That's what they want to charge. Actually, I checked just before airtime, and Walgreens, the cash price is $691, but if you have a coupon at GoodRx, it goes anywhere between $580 and $620 a month, or $8,300 a year. Now, there are lots of promotional bargains associated with the drug. And the drug company is basically giving it away to get people hooked on the drug. So the question is Ajovy the answer to migraine headaches for prevention? The answer is quite simply no. It might be a small step along the road, but it's certainly not an answer. It's very expensive, and it's only modestly able to help. And according to the experts, it's not really any better than the currently available therapies that are much less expensive, but it probably has a role. Now, if you'd like to know more about migraine or the other drugs, Aimovig or Emgality, or if you want to know about migraine in general, we have videos on all of them. Maybe you'd like to subscribe. Then you keep up with what we're doing. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Ken Landau.